This is the Analysis in Chains with Nathan Williams and Neil Kieran.
Welcome to Analysis in Chains. I'm Nathan Williams. Let's take a break today from talking about the up and down pogo stick that is the Bitcoin price, and let's instead talk about incentives. I love talking about incentives, even when my voice is hoarse, because I am at the tail end of a cold. You probably hear it, but nevertheless, I always love thinking about incentive models. What motivates people to do things? Why am I motivated for anything? Blockchain started because of people thinking that they could remake an incentive model, that they could set the incentives and rules in such a way that they could keep track of bank accounts and who has what money without the need of a central bank. And the most interesting blockchain applications, I believe, are the ones that play with incentive models to create entirely new systems of rules, change the rules of our society. I got into blockchain back in 2017 because I wanted to build a project. My project is called Minespider, and it's going quite well. We are tracking metals on the supply chain, making sure the gold in your jewelry or the cobalt in your smartphone aren't funding slavery and child labor in at-risk areas of the world. It's a cool project, and we've got our partnership with Volkswagen, and that we've been working on for a couple of months. We've got another couple of big projects that we're going to be announcing soon. Everything's exciting, but in the process of going through these projects and tracking materials in the supply chain and seeing where do our materials really come from? Where do our products come from? I have the right to know what I'm buying. Where does it come from? I started thinking about why I have to do this in the first place. Why is it that there are slaves in the supply chain, that there are children working in mines, that there are, vast swaths of rainforest being destroyed for palm oil? And I think that all of it has to do with incentives. And there's a quote that a friend of mine said to me once and has stuck in my head. I don't know if he heard it somewhere or not, but it was that every problem we face today is the unintended consequence of a problem we faced and solved yesterday. I think that's very true. I think that when we look at global problems that we face today, they are the direct consequence of the solution for a problem that we used to have. So the obvious example is climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions are crazy. Why? Because we found oil, and it was the solution for the problem of production. We can, now travel great distances in a short amount of time. We can plow huge fields. We can operate enormous machinery because we have access to this fuel that has an amazing amount of energy. It's the solution to a problem we had yesterday. Now we need a new solution for the problem we face today. When we're dealing with things like human rights abuses in the supply chain, why does that happen? It's not just that it can happen, and we need to track where our materials come from so that we can have the good material supply chain and we just all buy from there. That's a good start. But the reason we have slaves in the supply chain is, I believe, to be directly related to the entire economy that we work with, that we live in. If you think about it, our economy is based on one principle: profit. You got to make a business case. You got to turn a profit. If a public company doesn't turn a profit, the management board is liable to the shareholders. That's the only thing they're there for. You can triple bottom line it all you want, but at the end of the day, they're judged on one thing. Did they make money? I've met a lot of people who are humanitarian working in these big companies. And they put a lot of time and effort into compliance, into having a positive impact in their supply chain. They are doing their best. The problem is that companies are not singular units. There are departments in a big company that are specifically for buying. They are procurement. And these people are lovely people just like you and me. But they are judged on one thing. Can they get a better deal? And if you or if I were working in one of these departments and my incentive was, if I get a better deal, then I might get a bonus, and if I don't get a better deal, I might get fired, then what would I do? I would try to get a better deal. So imagine you're at a downstream company. You're making smartphones, you're making cars, doesn't matter what you're making. And you have to buy parts that go into those cars, that go into those smartphones, that go into those whatever else you're making. And you need a better deal. So what would you do? You call your suppliers, and your suppliers are big companies, and you say, look, we've been working together a while. Next year, I imagine that you've gotten more efficient just from working with us. We're a big company. You're a big company. I need a 10% discount. I need a 20% discount next year. And your supplier is going to be a big company. And they say, sure, we can do that because we've gotten more efficient. So what do? Well, they've got buying departments too. And so they say, well, look, we've got to get a 20% discount in order to still make money because now we're being pressured. And so they call their suppliers and say the same thing. And the cycle repeats. But eventually you get to smaller companies or companies in areas where there are fewer regulations. And eventually someone says, yeah, I can get you that 20% discount. I just have to make that guy work for free. Or I just have to send that child down into the mine. And this is how incentives get misaligned. If someone is incentivized to make slaves or to send children down into adverse working conditions, and they've got very little consequence for doing so, and they've got a big consequence for not doing so, well, essentially this becomes an externality. This becomes something that is a direct result of our entire system of economy that no one sees. The person at the other end of the supply chain asking for the discount doesn't see it. They just want a discount. And most people in the supply chain don't see it. They just want to get their discount. So the solution that we have right now is that you have regulation comes into play. And so you have this incentive model where companies, and especially procurement departments of companies, are incentivized to push for better and better deals, and then government comes in as the brakes, trying to say, okay, well, let's make sure that whatever you do, you make sure that you're not funding these human rights abuses. And so that sets up an adversarial relationship, one against the other. And that means that we're likely to go around the regulation or to find loopholes or that sort of thing. And the question is, can we align our incentive models so that the regulations and the companies are going in the same direction? That would be the magic bullet. I don't know. I think the only way would be to completely rewrite the rules of our economy. Like, if I'm honest, I think that the most effective solution would be actually what blockchain is really good for, rewriting rules. So how could that look? Well, the first step is we need to have vision in our supply chain. We need to be able to see it. We need to know what is going on. Where are we getting our products from? That's what I'm working on. That in itself is not enough. The real question is, can you incorporate a social score? Can you incorporate how responsible a company is directly into their incentive model? I think you can. How many of you seen Black Mirror? You ever see the episode where someone's social score directly affects their ability to buy things? I think China has been in the news a couple of times for trying to work on a social credit score for their citizens. A little bit scary. But what if you had a social credit score that only affected companies? Companies are not people. Companies do not operate like people do. They're made up of people, but companies themselves operate based on one thing: maximizing profit. Individuals don't do that. People operate on a bunch of motivations, on relationship, on autonomy, mastery, purpose. Yeah, they want to have cash as well, but they want relationships. They want status. There's many, many different motivators for a human that are not necessarily there for a company. For a company, it all boils down to money. And so it would make sense then that you would have a social score. Now, it's one thing, companies already do get graded at, and maybe include their triple bottom line. Maybe they have their analysis of their carbon emissions or how much work they do in the community. But I think there's a couple of adjustments that could be made that would make a huge difference in our whole global incentive model. And it's not that big of a change. Number one is that you would need to have more or less a unified score based on how responsible you are being, but that incorporates how responsible your suppliers are. So I have a score, maybe 1 to 10, and maybe my suppliers also have a score 1 to 10, and my score is raised up or brought down by the scores of the people I buy from. So that in itself is quite powerful, because if I want to have a better score, I could either shift some buyers, or if I've got long-standing relationships and good supply chains, maybe I help my buyers to get better scores, so it raises mine. It becomes a race to the top. But the second thing is more important, is how do you then close the loop? How do you make it so that it's incorporated into the incentive model? And the answer is, it has to tie directly in to a company's ability to operate. So we've already seen a little bit of this. I think that the market might be ready for it. We've seen investors pulling out of socially irresponsible companies, or moving into green funds, or impact investment has become a thing only in recent history. The ability of a company to borrow, the ability of a company to get investment, or the ability of a company to spend could all be tied to their social score. Imagine your social score was similar to your credit rating. A small change in your credit rating changes how expensive capital is. And if a social score that was tied to your suppliers was also tied to your ability to borrow, we would see a lot of companies move very quickly to increase that score. I don't know exactly the details of how we would calculate such a score. I think it would have to be based on a number of factors. Maybe it would be industry specific, or maybe it would be just based on initiatives. What is a company doing? How many things is a company doing? I don't know, because every company is different. Every industry is different. It can't be too detailed and industry specific. Otherwise, we would never be able to boil it down to a number. But I think from a conceptual point of view, incorporating that triple bottom line into a score that